In this video, we're going to focus on the filters shown on the dashboard page, and that means we don't need some of these files. So I'm going to leave base open. I'm going to close down button, header, the header styles file, the expense summary component, page header, and content container. I'm going to kick things off by opening up the component that we're going to be styling. That is the expense list filters component. This is a stateful component, and it does also render some stuff to the screen. We have our search input, we have our select dropdown, and we have our instance of date range picker. On this root div, I'm going to add a class name, and right here we will just reuse content container, making sure to center those filters so they're not pushed right up against the edge of the screen. Then we're going to focus on the actual structure that goes inside of here. The goal is to have that list of items as seen over here. We're going to have some space in between them. For desktop, we're going to stack them left to right. For mobile, which we'll focus on later, we're going to stack them top to bottom. Now, to actually get that working, we are going to have to create a few wrapper divs. So right here, just before our search input, let's go ahead and add a div. Then I'm going to take this and copy it to the clipboard. Inside of this div, I'm going to paste 3 times that div tag. So now we have a div with 3 divs inside of it. You can think of this as the list root and these as the individual list items. For each list item, we will put one thing inside. So right here, I can go ahead and copy the search input. I'm actually going to cut it out, and I can paste that right inside of the first div. The second div is going to have the next thing on our list, the next thing on our list being the select. I can take that, I can cut it out, I can paste it in the second div. Perfect. I'll let auto formatting fix this in just a moment. And the last one is going to be the date range picker. I'm going to cut that out, remove the empty space, and paste it right in the other div. Now, if I go ahead and save things, we can see we have those 3 divs, each with an input inside, whether it is an input like a search field, a select dropdown, or a date range picker. Now, by default, over inside of the browser, we're not exactly getting what we were hoping for. These are all divs. They stack vertically because they use display block by default. We're going to go ahead and set all of this up to work with Flexbox by adding a few classes. I'm going to start with a class on the root right here, class name, setting it equal to, and we're going to go ahead and use input group. Now, for each of its children, we're going to add another class name, input group __ item, for example. I can take this opening div tag, I can swap out the other 2 opening div tags, and now we have the complete structure set up. We have input group in there, we have 3 divs, each with a class name of input group item. So actually adding the partial and setting up some of the basic styles, that's going to be your challenge for the video. So let's outline what I'd like you to do. Over inside of another file, I will paste in the outline the styles file works. So inside of here, the goal is to first create that input group partial and get it loaded in. Then you're going to add selectors for the 2 classes we just set up. On the input group, you're going to set up Flexbox so things move left to right, and you're also going to add a little space below the group with something like a margin. Then you're going to set up a margin on the right for the individual items. That's going to make them look a little more like this. It is not going to style the actual inputs, it's just going to get the flow looking correct. So take some time to knock that one out. Once again, for the style challenges, the actual details aren't what's necessarily important. It's the big picture structure. So it's getting that list going from left to right with space below the list and space between each item. Take some time, give that one an honest try, then we'll come back and move through the process together so you can get all of the exact values. Pause the video, and when you're done, click play. How'd that one go? I'm going to kick things off by creating the new file in the styles components folder. This one will be _input group.scss, and I am also going to import it inside of styles.scss. In here, I'll just duplicate the last line and swap out page header for input-group. So we have step 1 down. Step 2, we have to add selectors for input group and input group item. Over here, input group. Down below, input-group underscore underscore item. And now we're going to focus on actually styling things. For input group, there were two main things we wanted to do. First up, we wanted to set display equal to flex to get things going left to right. And we also wanted to set right here, margin, bottom, and we're going to set that equal to something like L size. If you used a different sizing variable, that's perfectly fine. I just wanted you to set up margin bottom. You can always swap it out for L size now. For input group item, we want to set some spacing to the right of each element. So if we're stacking things left to right, we don't want them pushed right up against one another, so we can set margin hyphen right equal to, and right here I will set it equal to the variable value S size. Awesome. Now we can go ahead and save the input group partial. We can also save the changes we made to the expense list filters component, and hopefully we should see the basic structure starting to take place. Right here, I do have the inputs. They are stacked left to right, and I do have a little bit of space between them and below the list. So that's all you needed to do for the challenge. We took care of steps 1 through 4. Now that we have that in place, let's continue on. What we're going to focus on is actually styling the list for mobile. So we can set up some custom styles for the mobile browsers. If I go ahead and bring things in, we can see right here that we get into some pretty interesting situations. We have the input for the date range picker looking pretty poor. Everything is stacked left to right. At a certain point, we do want to stack things vertically. So just like we did with the last application, we are going to be using @media to set up media queries. Now, we already have a variable inside of the settings file for that. Over in settings, we have the desktop breakpoint variable. This is something we used previously, and it is something that we will once again use here. Let me jog your memory on how this works. Right inside of a selector like input group, we can use @media. We then open and close some parentheses, and we open and close curly braces. These are the styles that we're going to apply for larger screens. And in order to actually configure that, we have to set min width right here. And we're only going to apply these styles when the minimum width is, and then we provide the variable. Right here, we have desktop breakpoint, though we could just define the REM value in line. So now we have the ability to set up styles specifically for those larger screens, and here we can have styles for the smaller screens. So on smaller screens, I'm going to set flex hyphen direction equal to column. By default, it is row, so it goes left to right as opposed to top to bottom. Now we're going to be setting it equal from top to bottom on mobile, and down below for those larger screens, we can use a flex direction of right here row. So now we have the ability to differentiate between the two, and I'm also going to go ahead and change the margin bottom. So I am going to copy this line and paste it down below. I'm going to stick with a large variable size for those larger screens, and for smaller screens where we don't have a ton of real estate, I'm not going to waste a ton of real estate with spacing. I'll use M size instead. So this is going to get us part of the way there. Input group now is going to be able to actually change between the two. Right here, we do see things stacked vertically, which is great. As I make the screen wider, we eventually hit that breakpoint where things transition. Desktop looks good. For the smaller screens, we don't have any space inside of there, so I am going to set up some spacing properties down below in input group item. We're going to set margin right here, bottom equal to, so for mobile screens, I will set the margin bottom equal to S size. Then we're going to add another media query. I can just copy this one from up above. And for those larger screens, we're going to go ahead and set the margin on the right. Now, it's important to remember that these old styles are still going to exist. So while we will have the margin bottom on smaller screens, for larger screens, we're going to have a margin on the bottom and a margin on the right, which isn't what we want. We want to remove the margin from the bottom. So I'm going to define margin, setting it equal to, this would be 0. Then I'll go ahead and use S size for the right, then 0 for the bottom and 0 for the left. Now we have everything set up correctly. For mobile devices, we will have the spacing down below, which is great because they're stacked vertically. And for wider devices where they are stacked left to right, we will have the spacing on the right. So there we have it. We now have the filters at least styled. The group is looking good, and we can focus on the individual items. So obviously the date range picker comes with its own set of styles. We're going to keep those. We're just going to focus on styling that search input and the sorting select dropdown. We'll tackle that in the next one. So let's go ahead and jump over there.